Before we begin, let me know in the comments where you're watching this video from, and don't forget to subscribe. Enjoy the story. Ethan Lancaster's imposing mansion in San Francisco looked like something out of a dream. With its vast glass windows and meticulously manicured gardens, it was the ultimate symbol of a life built on intelligence, sacrifice, and ambition. Yet, to him, none of it held as much value as Olivia Carter, his wife. From the moment he met her 5 years ago, he knew without a shred of doubt that he wanted to spend the rest of his life by her side. Olivia was sweet, determined, and full of life, a woman who seemed utterly indifferent to his wealth and status. Their marriage was seen as perfect by everyone. At gala events, Olivia smiled beside him, held his hand with quiet confidence, and looked at him with a genuine sparkle in her eyes. Friends and colleagues would often say Ethan had everything a man could ever want: an unimaginable fortune, a groundbreaking tech company, and an extraordinary wife. But over time, a corrosive thought began to creep into Ethan's mind, silent and insidious like a growing shadow. At first, it was just fleeting doubts, small, almost imperceptible. Offhand remarks from business associates about how difficult it was to trust people when you had money. Stories of marriages that had crumbled under hidden agendas. He tried to push those thoughts away, clinging to his belief in Olivia's love. But then came the discreet glances, the hushed whispers at social gatherings, the cruel jokes about how no woman would ever turn down a man with a powerful last name. The doubt took root for good one evening over dinner with Nathan Brooks, his longtime friend and business partner. The upscale restaurant in Los Angeles was bathed in golden light, the air rich with the aroma of gourmet dishes. Between sips of whiskey, Nathan smirked and asked, "Do you really think Olivia would have married you if you were just an average guy with an ordinary paycheck?" Ethan let out a forced chuckle, trying to mask the discomfort settling in his chest. "Of course, Olivia's not that kind of woman." Nathan raised an eyebrow, crossing his arms. "Every wealthy man likes to think that. But the truth is, when the money disappears, for some women, love goes with it. Haven't you ever been curious to know for sure?" That question echoed in Ethan's mind all night. He knew Olivia better than anyone, or at least he thought he did. But would her love withstand a sudden loss? Would she still stand by him if he were no longer the powerful mogul she had married? In the following days, doubt turned into a silent obsession. Ethan began scrutinizing every little detail, the glimmer in Olivia's eyes when he talked about business, the way she never asked about investments but always showed interest in the charity events he sponsored. Things that had once seemed natural now felt layered with hidden intentions that perhaps only existed in his own tormented mind. One night, as he lay beside her in bed, Ethan watched Olivia sleep. Her serene face, her hair spread across the pillow, the gentle rise and fall of her breath. He wanted to believe that nothing would ever change, but an irrational fear kept him from trusting completely. That was when an idea began to take shape, a way to uncover the truth, to test Olivia and put an end to this uncertainty once and for all. If Olivia truly loved him for who he was and not for what he had, then she would stay by his side even if he lost everything. Ethan had no idea how much that plan would change their lives forever. The days following his dinner with Nathan were pure torment for Ethan. He tried to ignore the weight of his friend's insinuation, but doubt clung to him like an unrelenting shadow. Did Olivia love him or for what he had? He had never questioned it before, but now, every little thing she did seemed to carry a hidden meaning. He started noticing the smallest details, the way her eyes sparkled when he mentioned a new business achievement, the questions she asked about the company's growth, her excitement over gala dinners and charity events. Before, he had always seen these as reflections of her unwavering support. But now, a cruel thought whispered in his mind. What if it was all just interest? The paranoia grew. One afternoon, while working in his penthouse office in San Francisco, Ethan overheard Olivia on the phone with her best friend, Emma Williams. He had just stepped out of the shower and, unnoticed, paused at the bedroom door. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, twirling her blonde hair between her fingers, smiling as she spoke. "No, Emma. I can't imagine living anywhere else but here. This penthouse is perfect. And Ethan works so hard, he deserves all of this." Her words echoed in his mind like a gunshot. He knew Olivia hadn't said anything wrong, but his fear-ridden mind twisted the meaning. She loved the life they had, the mansion, the lavish dinners. But would she still stay if everything fell apart? That night, at a company event in Los Angeles, a well-known high society businessman, William Harper, approached Ethan with a knowing smirk. Harper was famous for his ruthless business tactics and his cynical views on relationships. "Ethan, a word of advice? Never trust anyone blindly, especially not a young, beautiful wife." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "And why wouldn't I trust her?" William chuckled, taking a slow sip of his whiskey. "I've been there. They say they love you, but try losing your fortune and see how long that love lasts. When you fall, the first thing to disappear isn't the money. It's the people." That conversation was the breaking point. Something inside Ethan snapped. The doubt that had once whispered in the back of his mind was now screaming. He began recalling similar stories. Friends who had watched their relationships crumble the moment their bank accounts ran dry. He had never wanted to believe that Olivia could be like that. But now he had to know. The next morning, Ethan went for a run in Golden Gate Park, but his mind was elsewhere. If Olivia truly loved him, she would stay by his side through poverty. But how could he find out without actually risking everything? He couldn't just leave it to chance. That was when a plan started to take shape. A test. He would simulate complete financial ruin. He would create a scenario where he lost his company, his fortune, his influence. Olivia would have to believe it. Only then would he know the truth. Back at the mansion, Ethan headed straight to his office and picked up the phone. He called his trusted attorney, Mark Reynolds, and asked him to come over that evening. Then he sent a message to his personal assistant, Derek Coleman. "I need you. Confidential. Meet me in the office tomorrow morning." He already knew this plan could have irreversible consequences. But the fear of living a lie was far worse than any risk. Olivia trusted him blindly. Now he needed to know if he could trust her. Night fell over San Francisco, and Ethan Lancaster's mansion, bathed in the soft glow of its chandeliers, looked more imposing than ever. But inside, Ethan felt as if everything was about to collapse. He sat in his private study, a spacious room with dark wood-paneled walls, lined with books and awards from his company. But for the first time, none of it held any meaning. Across from him, Mark Reynolds, his longtime attorney, studied him with a serious expression. A methodical man, Mark spoke slowly, his gestures always calculated. He knew that if Ethan had called for a private, urgent meeting, something significant was behind it. "You want to fake your own bankruptcy?" Mark repeated, disbelief evident in his tone. Ethan took a deep breath, leaning back in his leather chair. "I want it to look real. I want Olivia to believe we've lost everything." Mark frowned, clasping his hands together on the desk. "Ethan, do you realize what you're asking me to do? This isn't a game. If this leaks, it could seriously damage your company's reputation." "I know," Ethan replied immediately, "but it's a risk I'm willing to take." Mark sighed, studying his friend's face. He had known Ethan long enough to understand that once he made up his mind, there was no turning back. "What exactly do you want me to do?" Ethan slid an envelope across the desk. "Here's the plan. I want you to spread the word among a few key people. The story will be this: Lancaster Tech is being sued over a major financial scandal. The government has frozen my assets, investors are pulling out, and I no longer have the means to sustain my wealth." Mark flipped through the documents carefully. "This is convincing, but you'll need allies. I've already called in Derek Coleman. He's going to help create chaos inside the company." Mark shook his head, intrigued. And how do you expect Olivia to react? Ethan turned his gaze to the fireplace burning on the other side of the room. I don't know, but I need to find out. The next morning, Derek Coleman arrived at Ethan's office right on time. Tall, athletic, and always impeccably dressed. He was more than just a personal assistant. He had been Ethan's right-hand man for years. All right, boss, tell me what the hell is going on, Derek said, shutting the door behind him. Ethan explained everything, every detail. He told him about the doubts that had been tormenting him, the poisonous remarks he had heard, and his decision to test Olivia. First, Derek laughed, thinking it was some kind of joke. But when he realized Ethan was serious, his expression darkened. Ethan, this is insane. You're going to risk your marriage over a whim? Ethan clenched his fists on the desk. This isn't a whim. I can't live without knowing if her love is real. Derek remained silent for a few moments. Then he let out a long, heavy sigh. All right, I'll help. But if this backfires, don't say I didn't warn you. The plan was set in motion quickly. Over the next few days, small rumors began circulating within the business world. A few well-placed phone calls were made, and before long, the news exploded. Lancaster Tech was on the verge of collapse. The final blow came when a prestigious financial magazine in New York published an exclusive report detailing alleged financial irregularities within the company. The article was completely fabricated but disturbingly convincing. The fallout was immediate. Stocks plummeted, shareholders demanded answers, and key clients began pulling their contracts. The night everything came to light, Ethan arrived home late, his expression weary, his shoulders heavy with the weight of what he had set in motion. Olivia was in the living room, waiting for him, holding her phone with the article displayed on the screen. Ethan, what's going on? Her voice was laced with genuine concern. He stared at her for a long moment, his chest tightening. This was a test. But what if he was making an irreversible mistake? Swallowing hard, he forced himself to speak, his voice rough with feigned despair. We lost everything, Olivia. We're broke. He would never forget the way she looked at him in that instant. And now the real test was about to begin. The silence that filled the room was thick, like a storm on the brink of breaking. Olivia's wide eyes remained fixed on Ethan, the glow of the phone screen illuminating her pale face. Her heart pounded with a mixture of disbelief and fear. What? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Ethan exhaled deeply, running a hand down his face. The lie had been spoken. Now he had to see it through to the end. Everything collapsed, Olivia. Lawsuits, frozen assets, investors pulling out. The company is bankrupt. He didn't have to try too hard to appear devastated. The weight of what he had orchestrated was suffocating on its own. Olivia slowly rose from the couch, still gripping her phone as if the reality of it hadn't fully sunk in. She walked toward him hesitantly, searching his eyes. But how? You've always been careful. You've always been in control. Ethan averted his gaze, feigning frustration. It was a miscalculation, a trap. It doesn't matter anymore. The fact is, I have nothing left. The mansion, the cars, the money, it's all going to be taken in the next few weeks. We'll have to sell this house and find someplace cheaper to live. For a few seconds, Olivia stood still, taking deep breaths, trying to process his words. It was as if the world around her had suddenly blurred. Ethan braced himself for anything in that moment. He expected to see her panic, maybe ask if there was a way out, if they could still turn things around somehow. He expected fear, uncertainty, maybe even anger. But what came next was something he never anticipated. Olivia stepped closer and, without hesitation, cupped his face in her hands. Ethan, this doesn't change anything. He blinked, stunned. What? We still have each other, don't we? Olivia smiled, her eyes shining with warmth. If we have to sell the house, we sell it. If we have to start over, we start over. I didn't marry your company, Ethan. I married you. Her words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. A knot tightened in his throat. For a moment, guilt pulsed through his chest. Was this real? Did she truly not care about the money? You're not. You're not angry? Scared? Olivia let out a deep breath and gave a shaky laugh. Of course I'm scared, but not because of the money. I'm scared because I see how much this is destroying you. Ethan, you've worked so hard to build your company. You are so much more than your bank account or your status. She slid her hands down to his shoulders, gripping them firmly. We'll get through this together. I can go back to work. You'll find a way to rebuild, you always do. Ethan wanted to believe her words. He wanted to accept her loyalty without hesitation. But he couldn't. Not yet. The plan had to run its full course. He needed to be sure. Swallowing hard, he lowered his gaze. I don't know how I'll move forward, Olivia. Everything I built, it's gone. She didn't hesitate. She wrapped her arms tightly around him, holding him as if her presence alone was all the support he needed. You still have me, and I'm not going anywhere. Ethan closed his eyes. The guilt crashed over him like violent waves, but he had to keep going. The real test had yet to begin. The cold wind sliced through the bustling streets of Brooklyn, New York, where Ethan and Olivia were now trying to rebuild their lives. The mansion in San Francisco was a distant memory. Within weeks, what once seemed like an empire had crumbled into a tale of ruin. Ethan had lost everything: his company, his standing in the market, and the financial security he had always known. The apartment they found was small and modest, with peeling walls and a cramped kitchen, a stark contrast to the grandeur they had once been accustomed to. Olivia, however, never complained. On the contrary, in those first few days, she did everything she could to make their new home feel warm. She placed flowers on the table, arranged the few pieces of furniture they had managed to buy, and cooked simple dinners, always smiling at Ethan, trying to show him that this wasn't the end. But he could see the growing exhaustion in her eyes. The rent and bills quickly became a burden. Ethan, still maintaining the lie that he couldn't find work, pretended to spend his days searching for opportunities, only to return home empty-handed. More and more, Olivia found herself carrying the financial weight alone. That's when she made her decision. She had to work. She spent days walking the streets of Brooklyn, handing out resumes to cafes, bookstores, and restaurants. Her teaching degree didn't count for much there, and without recent references, no one wanted to take a chance on her. With each rejection, she felt the weight of reality pressing down on her chest. But she couldn't give up. Then, on a cold afternoon, clutching her last resume in her hand, she came across a small cafe on the corner of a busy street. The scent of fresh coffee and warm bread brought an unexpected comfort. She stepped inside, smoothing her hair, and approached the counter. "Are you hiring?" she asked the man in an apron who was wiping down the counter. He looked up, studying her for a moment before answering. "Have you ever worked as a waitress before?" "Not officially," she admitted, pressing her lips together. "But I learned fast." The man, whose name was Tony, the cafe owner, furrowed his brow but handed her an apron. "Then prove it. If you survive today, the job is yours." Olivia didn't hesitate. She spent the next few hours carrying trays, balancing cups, taking orders, and cleaning tables. It wasn't the life she had imagined, but with every tip she earned, she felt like she was building something. When she got home that night, exhausted, she found Ethan sitting on the couch, staring at the wall. He looked up as she walked in, noticing the dark circles under her eyes, the fatigue already settling into her features. "I got a job," she said with a smile, trying to mask her exhaustion. Ethan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did. We did." She sat beside him, taking his hands in hers. "Ethan, you carried everything on your shoulders for so long. Now it's my turn. This doesn't scare me. I just want us to be okay." He stared at her for a long moment, feeling the weight of his guilt grow heavier. Olivia hadn't hesitated to roll up her sleeves. She was truly willing to face anything by his side. But for how long? Ethan knew the test had to continue. But now, something inside him was starting to crack. Because, for the first time, he wasn't sure if he could see it through to the end. New York's winter arrived early that year. The icy wind sliced through Brooklyn streets, and inside the tiny apartment, Olivia woke before dawn, tied on her apron, and stepped out into the cold for another day at the cafe. She had gotten used to the strong scent of coffee clinging to her clothes, to the exhaustion that followed her home night after night. But what weighed on her the most was seeing Ethan, a man so brilliant and ambitious, sinking deeper into silence. Every morning, he left the apartment saying he was looking for a job, but he always returned empty-handed, his expression more defeated each time. Olivia never doubted him, but deep in her heart, she wondered how much longer they could live like this. Ethan, on the other hand, was about to push his plan to the limit. He had already seen Olivia give up every luxury, endure hardship without a single complaint. But what if things got even worse? Would she still stay? He needed to find out just how far she would go. That afternoon, Ethan staged a new crisis. He came home looking somber, his shoulders slumped. When Olivia arrived, still in her cafe uniform, she found him sitting at the table, staring at a crumpled envelope in his hands. "What is it?" she asked, setting her bag on the couch and stepping closer. Ethan looked up at her, hesitation in his eyes. "I can't pay the rent anymore." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Ethan ran a hand through his hair, as if frustrated. "We've stretched our money as far as we could, but it's not enough. The landlord gave me an ultimatum. We have a month to leave." She stood in silence for a moment, processing the news. "Where will we go?" "I don't know," he lied. "I thought about looking for a temporary shelter, maybe somewhere on the outskirts of the city." Olivia took a deep breath. Her chest tightened, but her expression remained steady. "All right, we'll figure it out. If that's what we have to do, then that's what we'll do." Ethan frowned. "You're not going to ask if there's another way? You're not going to get angry?" Olivia let out a quiet sigh and knelt in front of him, taking his hands in hers. "Ethan, I love you. I didn't marry a millionaire CEO. I married a man. If we have to start over, we start over. Together." Her words hit Ethan in a way he hadn't expected. With each sacrifice, each unwavering show of loyalty, Olivia was chipping away at the certainty he once had about this test. She wasn't hesitating, she wasn't running, she wasn't giving up. But he still needed to push her to the edge. The next morning, Ethan planned one final test. He asked Olivia for money. Not much, just enough to cover some overdue bills. He knew it meant taking from the little she had managed to save through sheer effort. Without hesitation, Olivia opened her purse and handed him the bills. "Here, take it. If you need more, just let me know." Ethan felt his chest tighten. He took the money, but he could barely bring himself to look her in the eyes. Hours later, his friend Henry Sullivan, an influential businessman who knew the truth about Ethan's situation, stepped in. Ethan had asked him to approach Olivia and test her in a way that would leave no room for doubt. That night, Henry walked into the cafe where Olivia worked. He wore a perfectly tailored suit and carried an air of calculated confidence. He waited until she finished serving a customer before addressing her in a polite but deliberate tone. "Olivia Carter, right?" She frowned, instantly wary. "Yes. How do you know my name?" Henry smiled. "I'm a friend of Ethan's. Or at least I used to be. It's sad, isn't it? What happened to him? Losing everything so suddenly. That's not the kind of life a woman like you should have to endure." Olivia crossed her arms. "I don't know what you're trying to say." Henry leaned slightly over the counter, lowering his voice. "I'm saying you still have a chance to escape this miserable life. You're a beautiful, intelligent woman. You don't have to stay tied to someone who can't give you anything anymore." Olivia's eyes burned with indignation. What exactly are you insinuating? I'm saying you could have comfort again. Henry gave a half smile. I could offer you that. For a moment, Olivia stood frozen. Then her expression hardened. You don't know anything about me. Henry let out a cynical sigh. I know women like security, and I know Ethan can't give you that anymore. So I'll ask only once. Do you want a way out? Olivia gripped her apron tightly, her eyes flashing with a mix of anger and disappointment. The only way out I want, she said firmly, is to go home and tell my husband that we're still in this together. Henry studied her for a moment before a slow smile spread across his lips. You really do love him, don't you? More than anything, she answered without hesitation. Henry reached for his wallet, placed a generous tip on the counter, and stood up. I needed to see it for myself. Olivia frowned. What do you mean? But Henry simply smiled and walked out the door, leaving her confused and furious. She had no idea that night, her answer would change everything. Ethan waited for Henry to return and listened carefully as he recounted what had happened. When his friend finished, Ethan remained still, feeling the weight of the truth finally crashing down on him. Olivia had passed every test. She had given him her money, sacrificed her comfort, endured uncertainty, and even when given the chance to start over with someone else, she chose to stay by his side. The test was over. But now Ethan found himself facing an even bigger fear. Because after everything she had been through, would Olivia ever forgive him once she learned the truth? Night fell over Brooklyn, and the small apartment felt colder than ever. The guilt was suffocating, pressing down on Ethan's chest with relentless force. He had gotten his answer. Olivia truly loved him. She had endured every hardship, stood by his side without hesitation, proved her loyalty in every moment, and when given the opportunity to escape, she had refused. But now, a new question echoed in his mind. What if she never forgives me? He couldn't keep lying much longer. Every day beside her was a reminder that he had deceived the one person who had loved him for who he was, not for what he had. But how could he tell her? How could he confess that every tear, every sleepless night, and every sacrifice had been orchestrated by him? Ethan knew he was cornered, but before he could figure out how to reveal the truth, Olivia made the decision for him. That night, Olivia came home from work with a different expression. Something in her had changed. She seemed restless, as if she was battling something inside herself. She placed her bag on the couch, pulled out a chair, and sat at the kitchen table, watching Ethan in silence. Are you okay? He asked, a chill creeping up his spine. She hesitated for a moment before letting out a deep sigh. Today, a man came to the cafe. Ethan's heart pounded. A man? Who? He said he was your friend, Henry Sullivan. Ethan's breath caught for a second. His stomach twisted. Did Henry say something? Olivia lowered her gaze, fidgeting with her fingers. He made me an offer. He told me I didn't have to stay by your side, that I could have a better life. The silence between them became unbearable. Ethan swallowed hard, waiting for her next words. And what did you say? She lifted her eyes, her voice quiet but firm. That I choose you, always. Her words cut through him like a blade. He shut his eyes for a moment, guilt spreading inside him like an uncontrollable fire. She trusted him completely, and he... But Ethan... Olivia continued, her voice unsteady. I'm not naive. Something inside me is telling me that something isn't right. His eyes widened. He held his breath. What do you mean? She ran a hand down her face, as if trying to find the right words. Since all of this started, I've accepted every hardship because I believed in you. But something doesn't add up. You haven't found work, but it doesn't even seem like you're really looking. People keep showing up out of nowhere, testing me, like they're waiting for me to fail. She furrowed her brow, locking eyes with him. So tell me, Ethan, what aren't you telling me? His chest tightened. The truth was about to explode. ready to escape his lips like a scream that had been suppressed for far too long. He had to confess. He had to come clean and face the consequences. But then, a terrible thought surfaced, one final alternative. If he pushed her away before she found out the truth, maybe, just maybe, he could spare her the disappointment. It was a cowardly thought, but in that moment it felt like the only way out. And so he did the unthinkable. "I don't know if I can do this anymore," he said, his voice colder than he intended. Olivia's eyes widened. "What?" Ethan stared at his hands, unable to look at her. "Olivia, I can't drag you into this life. You don't deserve this." "What are you talking about?" Her voice trembled. He took a deep breath, summoning the courage to deliver the final blow. "You deserve better. Someone who can give you security. I'm not that man anymore." She shook her head, disbelief washing over her. "Ethan, are you breaking up with me? After everything?" The pain in her voice sliced through him like a knife, but he had to keep going. "It's what's best for both of us." Olivia was silent for a long time. He watched as her eyes filled with tears, but none of them fell. She simply took a deep breath, steadied herself, and after a moment, stood up. No shouting, no desperation, just a silent disappointment that cut deeper than any explosion of anger. She walked to the bedroom, grabbed a suitcase, and began packing some clothes. "What are you doing?" he asked, his heart pounding violently against his chest. "I'm leaving, Ethan. If this is what you want, I'm not going to beg to stay." Panic surged inside him. This wasn't how it was supposed to end. "Olivia, no." She cut him off, zipping up her suitcase with a sharp, final sound. "I did everything for you. I put my life on hold, endured all of this, and still you're throwing me away like I'm a burden." She took a deep breath, holding back her tears. "I am not a burden, Ethan, but you made me feel like one." And then, without another word, Olivia grabbed her things and walked out the door. Ethan stood there, motionless, listening to the sound of the door clicking shut behind her. And in that moment, he realized the full extent of his mistake. He had lost her. The apartment door closed behind Olivia, and the silence she left behind was deafening. Ethan stood frozen in the middle of the room, as if he had just been hit by an invisible force. His plan had worked. He had pushed her away before she could uncover the truth. So why did it feel like a crushing defeat? He had wanted to test her. He had wanted to see how far she would go. And now he knew. Olivia had endured every trial without hesitation, sacrificing everything, suffering through humiliation, exhaustion, and even the insinuation that she could have a better life without him. But after everything, he was the one who forced her to walk away. A suffocating tightness gripped his chest. He had made a terrible mistake. In the days that followed, he tried to go on with his life, but everything around him felt like it was crumbling. The apartment was empty. No more Olivia's soft laughter at the end of the day. No trace of her scent on the sheets. No little gestures that had once made him feel that, even in the midst of bankruptcy, there was still something precious left. He wanted to find her. He needed to find her. But how? What would he say? "I'm sorry. It was all a cruel test to see if you really loved me?" How could he possibly justify making her believe her entire life had fallen apart, when in reality, it had all been an emotional trap? Ethan had become a shadow of himself. He no longer went to the company, stopped returning calls from his business partners, and skipped meetings altogether. His apartment was a mess, time had lost all meaning, and the days blurred together in a haze of regret. Until one night, an unexpected knock at the door made his heart race. He opened it to find Derek Coleman, his personal assistant, standing there with an expression that was equal parts frustration and disappointment. "I waited for you to fix this on your own, but enough is enough." Derek stepped inside without an invitation, crossing his arms. "You look like hell, Ethan, and you're the one who broke up with her." Ethan ran a hand over his face, exhausted. "You don't understand. I understand perfectly, Derek snapped. You set up a cruel test to see if the woman you love was truly loyal. And when you found out she actually cared, instead of telling her the truth, you pushed her away. A bitter taste filled Ethan's mouth. I thought I was protecting her. Derek scoffed. No, you were protecting yourself. Because if you told her the truth, you'd have to admit you were wrong. The words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. Where is she? He asked, his voice hoarse. Derek let out a sigh, pulled a small piece of paper from his pocket, and tossed it onto the table. Find out for yourself. Ethan picked up the paper with trembling fingers. An address. The night air was sharp and cold as he arrived at the building Derek had directed him to. It was a simple apartment complex, nothing like the life of luxury Olivia once had. But none of that mattered to Ethan. The only thing that mattered was that she was here. He took the stairs 2 at a time, his heart pounding against his ribs. When he reached the door, he knocked and waited. Seconds later, Olivia opened it. She stood frozen at the sight of him, and Ethan felt a knot tighten in his throat. Olivia looked thinner, more exhausted, but still incredibly strong. Her eyes shone with surprise, and something else he couldn't quite decipher. Ethan? Her voice was hesitant, as if she doubted her own vision. He wanted to say so many things, but the words wouldn't come. So, acting on impulse, he did the only thing that felt right. He dropped to his knees in front of her. I lied to you, he confessed, his voice thick with emotion. She blinked, confused. What do you mean? Shame burned through him like fire. I never lost my fortune. I was never broke. It was all a test. The shock on Olivia's face was instant. She took a step back, as if she needed distance to fully process his words. What? Ethan swallowed hard. I was afraid that you were only with me for what I could give you. So I created this lie to see if you would stay even if I had nothing. The silence that followed was agonizing. Olivia stared at him, and he could see the disappointment spreading across her face like a storm rolling in. You played with my life? Her voice was quiet, but it carried a crushing weight. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. I regretted it the second I saw what you went through, but I was so trapped in my own pride that I didn't know how to stop. So you let me suffer. She stepped forward, her eyes shimmering with tears and anger. You made me think everything we built had fallen apart. You made me believe I was the only one holding our life together. And all because you didn't trust me? Ethan felt the pain in her words like a physical blow. I was an idiot, the worst kind of coward. But I'm here because I need you to know how deeply I regret it. I should have trusted you from the start. Olivia crossed her arms, staring at the floor, taking deep, measured breaths. Ethan knew she was fighting an overwhelming flood of emotions. When she finally lifted her eyes to his, her gaze was different. And what do you expect from me now, Ethan? His chest tightened. I don't expect anything. I just needed to tell you the truth. Because you deserve that. She remained silent for a long moment. Then, with a deep sigh, she took a step back and gripped the door. I need time. Ethan felt his heart sink. Olivia, I loved you with everything I had. She cut him off, her voice thick with emotion. And you destroyed it with a lie. And without another word, she shut the door in his face. Ethan stood there motionless, feeling the full weight of everything he had lost. He had found the truth he had been searching for. But was there still a chance to undo the damage? The closed door before him felt like a verdict. He remained standing, frozen, unsure of what to do. The silence from the other side was suffocating. Olivia was there, but at the same time she felt an entire world away. He ran a hand over his face, feeling the dampness in his eyes, tears he refused to acknowledge. What had he expected? That she would forgive him instantly? That she would embrace him and tell him everything would be okay? No, he knew that wasn't going to happen. The truth was cruel. He had destroyed her trust. And trust, once broken, couldn't be rebuilt with words. In the days that followed, Ethan tried to give Olivia space. But the need to see her, to fix what he had done, grew inside him like poison. He sent messages that went unanswered. He called a few times, but every call went straight to voicemail. He even drove to the cafe. But the moment Olivia saw him from behind the counter, she turned her back and disappeared into the kitchen. One of those dark nights, Derek showed up at Ethan's apartment and found him sitting on the floor, surrounded by crumpled papers, letters he had written to Olivia but never had the courage to deliver. "You need to do something," Derek said, sitting beside him. Ethan let out a humorless laugh. "I did. I told her the truth. Now all I can do is wait and hope she hates me a little less each day." Derek shook his head. "Waiting isn't enough. You broke her. Now you have to prove you're willing to rebuild her." And for the first time in weeks, Ethan had a plan that didn't involve lies. He started watching Olivia from a distance, not like a desperate man chasing after her, but as someone trying to understand her, to truly see her for the first time. And that was when he noticed something that shattered him. She was exhausted, not just physically but emotionally drained. Her eyes, once filled with energy, now carried a constant weariness. She left early for work, took double shifts at the cafe, and on weekends, she volunteered at a community school, teaching English to immigrant children. Ethan had never known that, because he had never asked. So he started taking action. Not directly, he knew Olivia wouldn't let him get close so easily, but he found ways to be there without her realizing it. At the cafe, he made sure she never had to lift heavy boxes. He paid her apartment bills anonymously so at least that weight could be lifted from her shoulders. He bought flowers and asked one of the children at the community school to deliver them to her, without a sender's name. She never suspected a thing. But little by little, Ethan began to notice something. She no longer looked as exhausted. That didn't mean she had forgiven him. The turning point came on a Saturday afternoon. Olivia was leaving the cafe when she noticed an envelope taped to her door. Her name was written by hand. She glanced around, suspicious, then opened it right there on the doorstep. Inside, there was a single note. "Come with me, just once. If after that you still want me gone forever, I'll go." And beneath it, an address. She clutched the note between her fingers, hesitant. A part of her wanted to tear it up and walk away. But another part, the part that still felt something for Ethan, needed to know what he was planning. So by late afternoon, she went. The address led her to a modest building, where she was greeted by a kind older woman named Maggie, who silently guided her down a long hallway to a door at the end. When Olivia stepped inside, her heart nearly stopped. The room was filled with children, the same ones she taught at the community school. But what made her breath catch was the massive whiteboard on the wall, where bold letters were written. Olivia Carter School, a place for new beginnings. Olivia blinked, stunned, and then he appeared. Ethan stood in the corner of the room, looking nervous, holding a stack of papers in his hands. "What is this?" Her voice came out softer than she intended. He took a deep breath, struggling to contain his emotions. "This," he gestured toward the room. "This is you. This is what you do. What you've always done. I never saw it before because I was too busy being an idiot." Olivia didn't respond. She just looked around, taking in every detail. "I bought this space," he continued, "but not for me. For you. For your dream. For the kids you've been helping even when you had nothing." Her eyes filled with tears, but not of joy. "You think you can buy my forgiveness, Ethan?" He shook his head, swallowing hard. "I know I can't, but this isn't about forgiving me. This is about you, about what you deserve." She crossed her arms over her chest, fighting against the flood of emotions crashing over her. "You destroyed me, Ethan. How am I supposed to trust you again?" And then he did something he had never done before. He cried, not just silent tears, but deep, gut-wrenching sobs that shook his entire body. "I know you can't trust me. His voice broke between ragged breaths. "But I'm here, and I'll keep being here, no matter how long it takes." He looked into her eyes, raw and unguarded. "I never want to lose you again, but if staying away is what you need to be happy, I'll accept that." The silence that followed was long and heavy. Olivia looked at the children, at the classroom, at the board with her name on it. This was a dream she had never even dared to imagine. She wanted to believe him, more than anything, but her heart wasn't ready yet. And so, she gave him her answer. "I need time, Ethan." And he smiled. Even his tears continued streaming down his face. "Take all the time you need." And for the first time, Ethan Lancaster understood what love truly meant. The days that followed were strangely quiet. Ethan waited. For the first time in his life, he didn't try to control fate. He didn't devise schemes to rush an answer. He didn't chase after Olivia to convince her to come back. He simply waited because he knew she needed time. And Olivia, she felt his absence. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to look at everything he had done and remember only the pain. But every time she closed her eyes, all she could see was the man who had knelt before her. The man who had cried for the first time, stripped of all pride and arrogance. She saw the school he had built in her name. She saw the small, quiet gestures he made, never asking for recognition. She saw the Ethan she had loved before everything fell apart. But could she ever trust him again? That afternoon, she returned to the school for the first time. When she stepped into the classroom, the children ran to her, wrapping their small arms around her in an embrace. Their innocent smiles warmed her heart in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. This place was a new beginning, but it was also a reminder of the past. And then, she felt it, a presence behind her. She turned slowly, already knowing who it was. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching her. There was no desperation in his eyes anymore. Instead, there was something deeper: respect, acceptance. He didn't say a word, because, for the first time, he didn't need to. The months passed. Olivia devoted herself to the school and the children, finding peace in her work. And Ethan? He learned how to wait. He saw her sometimes, passing by the school discreetly. He never pressured her. He never asked if she had forgiven him. But with each quiet gesture, a cup of coffee left on her desk with no note, an anonymous gift for the children, Olivia saw something she had never seen before. He had changed. And then, one day, she realized something. The anger was gone. Yes, he had hurt her, but he had also rebuilt her. And maybe, just maybe, she was ready to open that door again. That night, Ethan was sitting on his couch when he heard a knock at the door. He stood up slowly, used to the silence, used to the loneliness. But when he opened it, he forgot how to breathe. Olivia was standing there. She wore a thick coat to fight off the cold. Her hair loose, her expression calm. No anger, no resentment. Ethan was speechless. He didn't know if he should speak first, if he should beg again. But before he could say a word, Olivia extended her hand. "Can we talk?" He swallowed hard, fighting against the emotion welling up inside him. "We can." They walked through the city, no destination, no rush. For the first time since everything had begun, Ethan spoke without fear. No secrets, no games. He told her about his fears, about how he had been raised to believe that no one stayed with a man who had nothing, about how he had ruined everything because of that belief. And Olivia listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't judge, because she needed to understand, too. Then, after what felt like forever, she stopped walking and looked at him. "I forgive you, Ethan." He closed his eyes, feeling the wave of relief and gratitude crash over him. But before he could speak, she took his hand. "But I can't go back to what we were." His heart tightened. "I understand," he said, even though it hurt. But then, she smiled. "I want a new beginning. If you're willing to build something different with me." Ethan felt his chest expand with something he thought he'd never have again. Hope. He wrapped her hand between his own, looking at Olivia as if seeing her for the first time. "I want that too." And there, under the glowing New York sky, they started again. Not as before, but better, stronger, because true love isn't measured by what you lose or what you test. It's measured by who chooses to stay. And Olivia chose him. And this time, Ethan chose her too. No more lies. If you enjoyed this video, let us know in the comments. Your opinion is very important to us. Don't forget to subscribe. A big hug, and see you in the next video.